Assalamu alaikum. My name is HAFSA Yasin, and today we will discuss the power of a good policy and why public policies keep failing in Pakistan. So basically, we all knows that it is basically the good policy which basically work for the most economical, uh, like which work for the economic development of any kind of the country. So, whenever a country is prosperous, it means they have the strong economy, but also the most socially equitable and environmental sustainable ones countries have even more good policies. Uh, the most comprehensive, creative, and competent educational institutions uh, actually teaches uh, that how to implement and how to make a good policy. So basically, whenever there are skills, uh, whenever there is proper training, whenever there is proper investment, ultimately we achieve the right goals. So to have a good policy, we need the skilled people who are implementing this policy. We need the skilled people who are basically formulating the policy. We need to train our people to maintain a good policy. We need to enforce the sustainable use of uh, like resources. We need to enforce uh, uh, the sustainable use of natural resources, and ultimately because of all of these things, a state can achieve a long-term wealth. So until or unless we don't provide a perfect environment for the policy, ultimately the policy cannot be implemented in a proper way. So every society basically face never ending challenges, but ultimately public policy is the right tool or an action, or basically a regulation which must be formulated by the government to address the societal issues. a, a good policy is always the one which appear in the areas of education, politics, transportation, or any other vital sector of the state. So basically, the role of the government is to implement and promote such policies that basically contributes towards the economic growth, sustainable development, and improve the socio-economic well-being of the local people. Uh, Good policy is always the one which basically, and it is an immediate policy which doesn't follow a particular problem. Uh, it must be based for the implementation must be based for us in within the specific span of time, and ultimately the outcome must prolong for a long term period, and there must be the socio-economic growth, and there must be the hindered development. So a good policy is therefore the one uh, that basically work for the welfare of the state. There are different reasons because of which public policies keep failing in the state of Pakistan. The first one is basically the environmental degradation and global warming. As we know that the particular issue of environmental degradation is affecting all of the states in the world, but most of the states are basically trying to overcome and overlap this particular issue. In past, what we have done, We have cut through the forest, we have cut through the trees to establish the industries, and ultimately we never think about the future, that what would happen in future. And now we are facing the air pollution issues. And because of all of these things, there are the global warming issues. So what we have to do, what a state have to do, they basically have to look into the matters for a long term, that if we are cutting the forest for the industrial development, either or we are compromising on something. So what state have to do, that whenever they are going to implement kind of policy, whenever they wanted to make the state developed uh, in the industrial sector, the state have to focus that what would be the right place for the industrial sector, what would be the place that is not already in beneficial for the like state. So we need to make that place beneficial. We all know that there are huge areas which are not able to, which are not able to cultivate it. We cannot cultivate those places, and these are barren lands. So we need to utilize those barren lands for this purpose. So ultimately our barren land would be occupied for the development purpose, and we don't cut the forest and we don't cut the trees, and we shouldn't compromise on our environment, and we shouldn't compromise on the global warming. Then there is the failure to achieve the envisaged results. Ultimately, public policies are formulated, they are always on the point, but what the matter is that they couldn't achieve the envisaged result. The reasons is, the most of the times the policies which are formulated in our state are short term policies, and the short term policy never give us the like kind of results that basically long term policy give. So ultimately, because of this, we couldn't most of the times the state is not able to achieve the right results, or the results which must be beneficial for the state. Then there is lack of vision and leadership. Ultimately, we all know that the people who are ruling us from the past 70 or 75 years, they most of them has the lack of vision and leadership, and they never wanted to promote the state. Ultimately, they always wanted to promote their own self as the brand, and their most their most priority was not the state, but their most priority was their own existence in the state of Pakistan. Then there is the weak relationship between the community and the institutions. Ultimately, whenever we make a policy, we make the policy for community, we make the policy for the general public. But what happened ultimately, that whenever a policy is formulated, there is zero, or there is no role of the community, there is no role of the people, and ultimately these are the institutions which make policies, and ultimately they implement the policies. So when public will not even involved in the policy making process, when public will not even asked about that what is about what they basically wanted for their benefits, so how a policy can be beneficial for the people. As we all know, the examples of the buses, specifically the metro bus which is constructed in Islamabad and Rawalpindi. Most of the people were against the route that was basically constructed, but ultimately the consent of the general public was not even considered while constructing this particular project, and the result was most of the people were not even able to get benefit from this particular like this particular benefit, this particular policy or this particular project which was officially introduced, which were officially built it for the welfare of the general public. Then a good policy is basically a triple win policy, like which basically consider the economic and social and environmental gains altogether. But what basically is done in the state of Pakistan, that most of the policies are vote oriented policies. Ultimately, our political leadership has a strong influence on the policy institutions, and which basically resulted wrong policies in the state of Pakistan. We all knows that in our state, the democratic government ruled for the 5 years, and ultimately they are intending to introduce the policies which basically last for the 5 years, and ultimately which must be completed in the 5 years. That at the end of the day, they can claim votes, they can ask for the votes to the general public. So because of this vote oriented policy stress system, ultimately the state can get benefit properly. Then there's corruption. There's the huge corruption in the state institutions, and because of this problem, ultimately uh, there is the long impact, and most of the time institutions are failed to achieve the right results, and ultimately people are not able to trust the institutions and their leaders. And so, as we know, time is changing. Policymakers should view the social development, economic growth, equity, and sustainability as the interconnected goal, and they should work more for the general public instead of working for the political parties. The features for the good policy triple win, ultimately, that we have already discussed, that our policy must consider economic, social, and environmental goals together. A good policy is always the one which basically solve the problems of the citizens, which basically don't cause the political disagreement between the political parties, and it basically encourage the active citizenry. So, the regulatory framework should be designed in a way so that they use the state finances and encourage new technology in a way that not only generate the sustainable outcomes but also benefit the most vulnerable members of the societies. Uh, as we all know, the state is failed to achieve the envisaged result, puts high cost on the economy in terms of not only wastage of time and money, but also in the terms of damage the public trust and trust in the institutions and the leader. So, uh, what state have to focus on the welfare oriented policies, then there must be a planning and a complete cost benefit analysis. That whenever a policy is being formulated, this policy must benefit the general public as it is costed to the general public, because most of the developmental projects are started with the tax money of the people, and they are for the welfare of the general public. So the cost must be benefited, and there must be the cost benefit analysis, so we can achieve the right goals. So the policy making process in Pakistan actually lacks planning and complete cost benefit analysis, as it is evident from the metro bus projects. As we all already discussed this example, no matter how integral a certain policy is for the politicians, ultimately it is the local people that have to stake in it. Ironically, however, they are one who don't have any role in the policy making, but lack of public involvement in the policy process usually result the emergence of demographic and informational challenges, and this basically resulted that problems don't occur because of the absence of the public policy. Rather, it basically occurs because of the initiative constituted on paper are rarely ever put on the practice. A policy document always remain a piece of paper until it basically actually implemented. So the policies fail in Pakistan because the state lacks the leadership to operate on the public policy, and translate its political vision into the action. So basically, there must be the good governance, which at the micro and the mega level. So ultimately, we can achieve the better goals, and we can achieve the we can achieve uh, the and we can impact in a better sense on the society to achieve the goals, because inefficiently only prompts the citizen to disengage their trust in the government and further makes it harder for the good policies to implement. While there is no distinct blueprint, a successful public impact of any policy is based on the interlinked pillars: a calculated and well designed policy, proper legitimacy, and a solid delivery. This means that effective governance is a key prerequisite to an integrated public policy that will ensure sustainable development in the state of Pakistan. And that is how Pakistan can achieve so much growth and enjoy favorable relations with its neighbors, and they can have the better trade policies, they can have the better health policies, and they can use their human resource better, and this can ensure the long term prevailed skills, motivation, efficient labor, and efficient force for the country of Pakistan. Thank you so much. That is it for today. Hope to see you in the next lecture.